Well, welcome everyone. It's always an absolute joy to spend time with Rory Duff. Many of you by now will know his work. I've been following his work for some years, interviewed Rory several times, and I have huge respect for what he's doing in the world. He really is a very unique pioneer in his work. He's a geobiologist, as many of you know. And what he's really been focused on in recent years is not only identifying, but measuring the Earth's energy lines. And one of the many things I love about Rory's work is he always comes with scientific method. Things have to be measurable. And that is so helpful for us that operate more in the spiritual realm, because he's bringing this measurability in. So, and it was interesting, I was just talking to someone yesterday, this particular chap at a gathering, and thanking him for being such a big part of the puzzle. We all have a very unique part of the puzzle. And I was saying to him, you know, thank you for all the work you're doing in the world. And he made the comment, he said, well, some of us have large pieces of the puzzle, some of us have small, but it even takes the small bits to complete the puzzle as we move towards building a new Earth, which was a very generous thing for him to say. But I think Rory absolutely has a very big piece of the puzzle in creating new Earth, which is where we're focused and where we're headed. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, because obviously with my channel being an astrology channel, I always like to put everything in an astrological context. And Rory is living out in his work the increasingly Aquarius energy that we are moving into, which is all about decentralization, about groups, about networks, etc. But in this discussion, you will quickly see that Rory's work is taking a slightly different tack to what he's been doing in recent years, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So welcome, Rory.
Gosh, well, Pam, what can I say to thank you very much for that introduction, and hi. Yeah.
No problem. So as I was saying, your work up to now has been really about measuring, discovering the Earth's significant energy lines. And what's been fascinating for many people to discover is how they intersect at sacred sites. I mean, that's been fascinating in itself. But you've had this shift in focus recently to something you're calling the sacred path modules. So can you explain sort of what happened, what the connection is between those and the energy lines, and why you've taken this slightly different tack in your work?
Yes, thank you for asking that. It rather surprised me a little bit, but then and then I'm not sure why, because I'm getting surprised every day with everything. But I guess everything seemed to change back in 2017 when we started getting this increase in energies. And the energy lines doubled in their widths, and the new emperor dragons they began reappearing, and everything became that much more dynamic. Synchronicity started increasing, and before long I was up to my neck in new areas of study which I hadn't really appreciated was coming my way at all. Notably Jung and Jung's Red Book, and the synchronicity surrounding that, which is just, when I opened the Red Book pages, there's just, I'm looking, what's all this energy work here in his what's he seeing all these serpents and the node signs, and then I started looking into it in more detail. But then something strange happened. I thought, well, I'm getting something out of these Red Book images. I've spent hundreds of hours now reading the Red Book and absorbing it, but I did a talk at the Theosophical Society several years ago now, and I just thought I'd show them these Red Book images and ask them what they thought of these images. And having studied them myself for some time, I was quite blown away of how others were picking up things that I hadn't seen. And it was glaringly obvious that I'd missed them, or I just wasn't perspicacious enough, or a particular type of person to pick these things up. And I did this again with another group of people, and I began to realize that we are all different for a reason. And there were some other other aspects of Steiner, and Steiner's work came through with some synchronicity with. He'd studied Goethe and Goethe's fairy tale, and if you'll know anyone who's studied Steiner, he's a very big Goethe fan. Built the Goetheanum, which was a sort of homage to Goethe. And Goethe's fairy tale is something that he studied for years, trying to understand and fathom. And I sort of stumbled across this fairy tale, didn't know the Steiner connection, but instantly thought, oh my goodness, there's another huge geobiology connection in this fairy tale. And it was then that what popped out of that was this universal prophecy. And I wrote my book Grail Bound on that, which followed Grail Found. And it began to see that all of these events that had been prophesied in visions and legends or myths from around the world, we're all talking about the same single event, but they were all heavily symbolized. And just like Jung's images were heavily symbolized, it was painfully obvious that I wasn't going to be able to do this on my own. And at that point, there were other investigations. What is meditation? Where is that going? And Steiner was talking about the evolution of consciousness and the move from individual consciousness to group consciousness, and the power of groups. And so I thought, well, let's put some questions together for groups. And I started with one group now 3 years ago. Actually, in the lockdown, I was sort of learning how to use Zoom at the time, and we had this first online Zoom meeting with 9-10 people from around the world. It was brilliant, from America and Europe and the Middle East and Australia, and I proceeded to take people through Goethe's fairy tale and get the group's opinions. And I love asking questions, so I was designing questions for the group, and then we went on from that to look at a variety of other subjects, including Jung's Red Book images, where we really picked these images apart. And I was just blown away at what the group could start doing. And we went on this journey whereby we started with questions, and I had some sort of key learning points that I felt that I wanted to come out of these conversations. And as we progressed through the modules, we began to find out that the group itself had this path it would take. And we moved from discussion to something called dialogue, where you listen to dialogue in a state of awareness. So you're really giving the other person full attentiveness in that aware state. And when this starts happening, you get these insights coming through, for instance, what symbols can mean. And then you share those insights. And two remarkable things happen. Firstly, you get insights on each other's insights. And this applies not just from discussions, it's also dreams, it's also meditations. The first thing is you're picking up things in common which couldn't have been given. So there's synchronicity occurring within the group, and as soon as you have the synchronicity, we're being given something here. The subconscious that's connected to the universal is gifting us vital bits of the true nature of reality. And Jung himself would say, well, we're tools of the numinous. It's coming through for a reason. We're being taught. And I'd experienced this idea of being taught by working with the energies I mentioned before. The Gnostic serpent of the Garden of Eden was the instructor, the teacher. So this insights on insights through shared dialogue was just bringing the whole thing alive. But in the process of doing that, we began to realize that each of us in the group had our strengths. And one of the great things about universal prophecy, all of these spiritual ways of thinking, is that there's this thing: you must know yourself. And that means being confronted by your weaknesses. But this was being confronted by your weaknesses in a non-challenging, non-threatening way, because what you were beginning to see is other people's strengths, and realizing that you didn't have that strength. So you find your weaknesses out by finding out other people's strengths in the group, which is a tremendously positive way of undergoing a sort of personal transformation, because you want to be able to do what they do. I mean, typically, as an example, there are people who are more kinesthetic and empathic. There are others who are more visual, others who are more auditory. And because of that, their acuity in those senses is much greater than in the others. And you find that some people are always bringing things through empathically more than perhaps visually. And that's a very simple aspect of it, but it's just one example of how when you get people together in groups, the magic happens. And I've seen that mirrored in Earth energy line work, when we find the centers of nodes. We find that around 6 different types of people will find the center in a slightly different position. And when you've got those 6 people all finding the center of a node, they all end up in a perfect circle. And you can take them again to another node and do the same exercise, and they'll be in the same positions opposite each other and next to each other. And you think, whoa, goodness gracious me, how does this work? And again, there's a sort of sense of teaching going on. And this teaching aspect, I thought, well, we really need to encourage this, encourage small groups coming together and meditating on these nodes and growing as a group. Because I saw that as a forerunner to building local communities, groups connecting with other groups. So for the last 2.5, 3 years, I've been working on these modules with a view to helping people form groups on nodes. And you know, from my Sacred Network website, I'm putting up these sites so people can go to the local sites to pray and meditate. But meditation groups is one thing, but if you then have shared discussion and dialogue groups, and then shared dream groups, the synchronicity between all 3 has been off the scale. And I've been working with 3 groups now for over 2 years, and they're now off working on their own and enjoying an incredible ride of insights, synchronicity, joy, and discovery. And discovering what that particular group is best at then looking at. And that's been an amazing journey. And I wanted to get that so that everybody could share that. And out of that, there's a lot of things that come out of that. One of those that we are so far behind understanding what we need to understand. There's no doubt in my mind we're in this transitionary period, and help is needed from all aspects in all quarters. And I've turned to you a few times, as you know, to ask about the impact and astrology on meditation and groups and timing and things like that. And I know that what we've been studying specifically with regards to prophecy, and when we share insights and meditations, there are good days and not so good days, and days to avoid. And we literally must become prophets and know the future, and that really ties in with your field of work with astrology. So that's kind of like where I've reached. In fact, more recently we got to that point where we were, as you know, absolutely transitioning from the Piscean age into the Aquarian age, and noticing how that actually has implications with regards to how we do group meditation. So from individual consciousness to group consciousness, as Steiner talks about, we're going from working on our own to working as groups, but we're also transitioning into this new age of the water bearer.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, Rory, because, you know, as everyone I think watching my channel will know out there, Pluto starts to move fully into Aquarius next year for another 20 years. And what you're talking about in the groups, Rory, is really that the group becomes an organism in itself, that they interact through the kind of talking stick method to be very open to each other, and they form an organism which is connected to divine intelligence or the quantum field, or whatever we want to refer to it as. And this truly is Aquarian energy writ large, because Aquarius, as you well know, Rory, and viewers will know, is about decentralization, grassroots up, small groups of ordinary people coming together to form communities, to form collaboration, but then connecting, because Aquarius energy is very linked to networks like mycelium, like mushrooms or tree roots, sharing that information across the group, but it's also very connected to higher mind. So we're plugging into something which is beyond our own limited humanity as we've seen it up to now, to something much greater and much more powerful. So what you're doing is actually perfectly reflecting the Aquarius energy. I don't know how fully you knew that, but but you are, which is why it's so.
I don't think I knew it initially, but I can see from what Steiner was saying from his predictions of moving from the fifth to the sixth epoch, and how we're changing from the point of view of the characteristics in nature. He talks of us developing three characteristics. The first one is that we will feel and sense what other people sense. So if they are hungry, we'll feel hungry. If they feel pain, we'll feel pain. And there's a positive side to this, which is, if we feel love, they'll feel love, and if there's someone that is feeling very positive, we'll feel positive. But that's the first characteristic. Then the fruits of belief will be depending entirely on the individuality, which is we're seeing division everywhere in the negative side. But there's a positive side. There's this power of groups when you need individuals. That's the beauty about a group, is that you need different people to make it work. If everyone was the same, it wouldn't work. So it's now this process of how do we find the right group, and you can let that evolve and let that happen, or you can study it and study ourselves, and that there's a two side to it. And then the third aspect of this characteristic is knowledge going forward is going to be far more important when it's knowledge of the spiritual as opposed to knowledge of the material, and Steiner was emphasizing that. But to come back to the science and how that connects with astrology, we are living in a time of cycles within cycles within cycles, and you can see these on a small scale from the moon, the sun, day and night, through to passing through the solar current sheet every 8 to 10 days, the 4 sun cycles in the year, moving through to the planetary influences, to the galactic influences, where we've got 6,000, 12,000 year cycles, to the precessional 24,000 year cycles. All of these things we can see in astronomy, and we're seeing it now playing out, and how it's influencing us on the micro scale. So understanding these cycles becomes increasingly more important. And you mentioned briefly Aquarius, but I know we've talked before, but it's more than just moving into Aquarius. It's for instance, the Leo, which is opposite. And I am sure that going down into the depths of all the things that affect us, like you're doing so well on your channel, will give more and more help with regards to how we go forward with things. And give an example, the Leo aspect, the fiery aspect of this is beginning to come into the groups that I'm working with regards to how we change methodology in our meditations. The fiery signs now, we're getting indications that we're envisaging earlier, which is more watery signs. We're now not purifying by water, we're now spiritually purifying with water and fire. And that's an interesting transition which is happening, to the point where we probably, once we're fully into Aquarius, we will just purifying through fire ceremonies, through imagining fire and that sort of thing. So I find it's exciting times moving forward in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said many times in my videos that with so much head energy with Aquarius, we must balance it by Leo, by staying in the heart, to keep connected to our humanity. We've got to have that. And love is a fire. Sometimes people think that love is kind of weak, or pushover, or being passive, or that kind of thing. It isn't. It's an absolute warrior energy. Love. It is a fire of conviction and passion and focus. And I think that's very much, and it's so interesting when, the Aquarian energy seems like a paradox in some ways, because it's all about groups. But actually within that, I can see in so many aspects of my life, and people who write to me, each of us are becoming more unique in understanding our contribution within the group. So it isn't this all pervasive homogeneity when we form groups, quite the contrary. As you say, Rory, we've each got a very specific, very unique role to play. And that's a celebration of our uniqueness too, which we may never have felt to such a degree because we've had to conform in childhood, in school, in offices, in whatever. And that is passing away as the old order. So moving on, Rory, I know you've been running these groups for the last couple of years. What are you finding that's so compelling to the group about these Sacred Path modules? Is it the new information you're receiving, the synchronicities that you're getting?
I'm thinking that one of the interesting things about symbolism is what Jung calls the necessary ambiguity. When you look at the prophecies, the prophecies, when they're given to somebody, have a relevance to that person. For instance, we studied Blackout's Great Vision, and there was a definite relevancy to his life and his future going forward, how he would help his nation, his group, and yet there's also an underlying message which is for the future. And somehow, in some way, which is difficult to understand, is how that when you look at that message, you can actually see that higher message which is relevant for all mankind. But just like you have an individual group that can come together and study a subject like Blackout's Great Vision or Jung's images, you can take another group, put them through the same thing, and get a different take on it. It's somehow that ambiguity in the symbolism is interpreted in a relevant way for that group at that time. That then led me to the realization that there's a beautiful uniqueness in understanding what's going on here with this transition in regards to the whole of mankind. No one person, no one group is going to be given the answer. We have only going to get the answer if we can come together in lots of different groups all around the world. And this now like is a fail-safe mechanism to the evolution of consciousness, because if we're not ready for it, we won't get the information we need. So you're looking at this fantastic challenge which we now face in humanity, which is overcoming the last hurdle of getting over our division.
Yeah.
And recognizing that individuals are all going to be different. So just don't be judgmental. Just get over it. You know, they're not going to be like you. You're not going to be like them. We're not going to think the same way. We're not going to believe the same things. But there is this uniqueness which is so necessary within a group and then within lots of groups. So the fascinating thing, coming back to your question, is that when you take a different group through this, you're getting a different sort of flavor again. And then when you let the group go and you work with, they work locally, they will find exactly what they need to find through their meditations and dreams for them locally and regionally. So that again negates the need for a top-down approach. That decentralization, the Aquarian decentralization, is coming through at that base level, which I find is beautiful. So so that's exciting, because it means that is the way we're going to be able to evolve. I mean, it's not a sit back and do nothing scenario,
Yeah,
but it's not as though one person's got to lead it all.
Yeah, because I know what has driven your work, Rory, in its various aspects, is the evolution of consciousness, and you're really, at the heart of it now with these groups. And you mentioned that the information in these modules is not going to be something you can just kind of pick up and buy off the shelf. You have to kind of work through with the group. So how are you going to get the numbers of people that you need to form the groups worldwide? Because I know that's what the plan is, to have a sort of global network, which again, very Aquarius. So as I understand it, you have to be a group facilitator. Before you're a group facilitator, you have to go through the group process yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
In a way, I was kind of like corralled into having to do it this way, because I was using so much information that others had gifted us in the world, that exists under huge copyright legislation, but you can use that material under an educational copyright if you're a school. But you can't sell the books. So the idea is you sell the license to be a facilitator, and you get the books that way. But what you're doing is you're not releasing them with barcodes or anything like that. This is something which I can show you. These are, for instance, the first 3 levels of modules. And in here, this is the level 1 module. You've got all the questions. You've got space to answer, notes, and this is the facilitator's guidebook. So anyone, once they've done the module, can then take the guidebook and take their own group of people through that. And all the information's in there. And if you look at the delegates, well, they'll get their own notebooks to write all their notes in, and all the reading material is there. So that it's made it very easy for people to do this. And we're not telling people anyone. We're just actually asking open questions. So you have the material, and you ask the questions, and the group gets to decide and do that. So yes, it's a slow way of process of doing this, because you do need, for instance, the first module, 6 people. They can then go on and have their own 6 people and running their own groups. Then they run 6 people. So it's a slow process, but it will roll out fast, because one of the great things about when you are a delegate and you go through this as someone who's just experiencing someone else facilitating the session, you get a whole new perspective when you become the facilitator. So you only have to do it once as a facilitator to run your own group. And if everybody just does it once and then runs their own group once, it'll take a few years, but it will gradually spread to the people that want to be doing this or need to be doing this. So we don't need everyone in the world to be doing this initially, but we do need to get good working groups at sacred sites around the world who are building meditations and multi-faith meditations around these places, who are essentially, what we're doing with these modules is we're seeding consciousness within us, so that we're aware of all these things, such that we can be guided to what we need to be doing. And that's the key thing that comes it. But there's a really interesting aspect that the energies have taught us so far, is that this transition that we're going through, we're not being rushed. It's like the people trying to rush us through fear are making us, and even in our fast-paced lives, we've got to get something done. We've got to do it now. Well, if you look at synchronicity and how that rolls out, the beautiful thing about synchronicity, when you just follow synchronicity, is its sense of timing. You're not being rushed through synchronicity. You'll be taken nicely and smoothly through it. So although it's going to be probably down to the wire with the way spirit always seems to work, we're not being rushed. So the idea of spending a lot of money and getting millions of people to read these things individually is just pointless. This is a group exercise. We need to build groups, and the right people will come along, and they've already have. So I'm fully in faith, but we do need to start it off in some way. So we have this event on the 24th of September, where we're giving people an experience of this, of what it's like to be in this shared dialogue experience. And we're going to explore science, symbolism, and spirituality in that way, and go through the concept of prophecy and how the new science explains how that can actually work on a short-term probability basis and a long-term cyclic basis. So yes, it will take the time it takes. I have no doubt about that. So yeah.
But presumably there's a constant feedback loop, Rory, that whatever groups are discovering in their various geographies, they're feeding back to other groups. So they don't have to reinvent the wheel over here. New information has already been discovered to feed in. So that is going to be an accelerant for the evolution of consciousness, isn't it? Because we're all helping each other in those networks.
It is, and we have the sacred network encrypted social media platform website, which is allowing people to join groups and start groups, and all the module groups will be there, and there will be a lot of sharing of knowledge on that basis. But I see that happening less and less as we go on, because synchronicity and telepathy and shared thoughts, the universe itself, the grand design behind it all is far working far harder than we are. And it's bringing people together as it is. It's in waking people up, and people are just appearing. So there's a large part of that which is driving it, and I'm just kind of like one of these people that was guided to do this, and I feel yeah, blessed, thankful for being given the chance to do this, because I'm hoping I can sit back and watch it all unfold after a while.
Having kick-started it, yes, having ignited it. But it's such a brilliant idea, because the individual frequency of each of the groups will magnetize the right people to that group, and that's how it will grow organically. So Rory, how do people get started? How do they get involved in this in a practical way?
Register on the Sacred Network on the Sacred Path modules that you're interested in becoming a facilitator, and the message is up there already. There's information's up there too. If you can't get into the one-day thing we're having in Dorset on the 24th of September, it's an all-day event. If you can't get into that, which obviously not everybody's going to be able to do that, and if you do manage to get in there, we've got a tremendous offer to start you off as a facilitator, and it's a day open for people just to want to come and experience it as delegates or would-be facilitators. But at that point afterwards, and once you've registered, you'll be able to get on board, because in actual fact it's set up to get you going quite quickly. We have, because I've done this for 3 groups, we've got facilitators who are now able to facilitate the first 4 levels of these things. So we've got potentially 7 or 8, 9, 10 people who and not everyone wants to do it straight away or can do it straight away, of the people who've done it, but there will be facilitators ready to take you up to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and the 5th level. So that's all ready to go. And yeah, the books, as I said, there's a meditation module here as well too. It's a group to study on its own. It will all be ready by yeah,
Wow,
going November, October. So
it's a prodigious amount of work, Rory, and this really will be your legacy too, your major contribution to New Earth. So obviously all of the relevant information to the website, and also to the event on the 24th of September is underneath this video for you to really get involved very, very quickly now, because I think you're speaking at various events around the UK, Rory, as well. Yeah,
I've got a few more of those to do, which is all in my calendar on roryduff.com. I just remembered one other thing which is quite important. We still don't know what we're doing.
Right.
And this is really one of the big drivers of moving to group meditation. We've got the clues. The great geniuses of the past, like Jung and Steiner and Goethe, I've mentioned before, but others too, which we go into, they've been given the knowledge through their subconscious and their creativity as to what we need to do in group meditation, how we work with the energies. The clues are there. We understand the path, but we also know that not one person is going to be given this. Just a little glimpse of this. There's in the Red Book images, Jung has had this conversation with Ha the elemental. He calls Ha the black alchemist. It's an elemental, and Ha has written these glyphs in so many of his pictures, and Jung didn't understand what these glyphs mean. Nobody has looked at them and understood what they mean, and we need groups to go through and look at these glyphs, because of the groups that I've taken through it so far, we've picked up the understanding of what's going on. and we've managed to decipher a few of these glyphs, but not all of them. And it's about how we work with energy together in groups. At this, a little example. Sometimes when we have people standing in groups, they move and sway in a figure of 8 movement like this, and it was the groups working together and experiencing and sharing insights afterwards that there was a connection made to this concept of a blessing from the heart. I think the words are darshan, might be from Taoism or Buddhism. But when you sway backwards and forwards at the beginning in a figure of 8, you're actually sending a darshan out to all the other members of the circle. So you're sending that loving energy out, and everyone else is bathed in that. So there's a process here of working with bringing energies in and then spreading it out. And we know that there's some of the other symbols, there's aspects of where energy exists in your body, where you express it, where you bring it in. And the clues are also in Steiner's eurythmy and working with the energies and taking the external energies around us and internalizing them. And that's another clue as to where we're going. So one of the drivers for what we're doing, if we're going to succeed with this evolution of consciousness, it's about groups working together on sacred sites and learning to do what we're supposed to be doing, being taught by the energies on that site, but only groups that come together can do that. So that's I do want to add that aspect of it. So we need help, basically.
And you need the group, again, back to Aquarius. But it's so interesting what you've just said, Rory, that you don't really know what you're doing, because I was reading something earlier today from a lovely lady called Aluna Joy, and she was leading a group around some sacred stones, various sacred sites. And she said it was very odd, because normally she'll always pick up a lot of information at those sacred standing stone sacred sites. And she was getting nothing, and it was quite disconcerting. And then she realized that's because the future's a blank slate, because we've never done this before to such a degree. We've never evolved in our physicality in the way that we are doing now. There's been no rehearsal for this. So I often say in videos, trust the invisible, because the future is not yet formed, because we are doing it. We are doing it, and you in your sacred network groups, the sacred path modules, you are doing it, and each of us are contributing to that. So I think that is massively empowering for us to say, step into that. We are in the crucible of change right now, and even sitting them on your sofa, sending out love, being in a positive state, that is changing the quantum field structure.
Absolutely. And there are problems we face right now that solutions don't exist yet. And through groups, we'll find these solutions. And in fact, we're beginning to find one with some of the groups. And it connects with your work and an interview with the lady you did with recently on water.
Yep, Theda Austin.
And we've been looking at why we had a problem with meditations and trying to send an energy into Rome just recently at the last solstice gathering, and why the node there wouldn't activate. And when the group started working, 2 different groups started working on this, we begun to sense that there's a similar issue in London and also in Washington, D.C. And you can think of all the different connotations as to why that might be, but what came through in the groups independently was the problem with water.
Wow.
And in particular, the water underneath these 3 cities, which had been really clogged up since Roman times with sewage. And the answer was coming through to us through these insights that we need to get water and work with it. I won't mention any more details, but it's a little bit, we can measure it through Theda Austin's methods as to how successful it's going to be. But we're proceeding on that basis. And what tied this all together was a rather strange situation, was because the key node in Rome is connected to the river Tiber. which runs through Rome. But the groups in their investigations in Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, found that along Constitution Avenue, which runs from the Capitol past the Washington Monument, past the Jefferson Pierce, down into the Potomac, that avenue was built on top of a sewer. And that sewer used to be a river called the River Tiber, the same name. And we found the same issue in London, in the city of London. And there the river is the River Tyburn. And you begin to think, what? And solutions, and this only the groups can work this out and find these things, and the synchronicities of them all working together is just so. So we have 3 working groups, and we have 1 group overseeing it all, looking at how it's all happening. But I can see this as a wonderful way to not just come up with solutions to problems in the future, but it's the creativity to new entrepreneurial discoveries as well. As you know, in the age of Aquarius, we're moving into the air and more importantly, waves and vibrations. And there's already people saying, well, the new health is not going to be done through water; it's going to be done through vibrations, solutions. And we're back into really needing to get to grips with the astrological changes. We may even find we only heal people on certain times and days. Can you imagine?
So it's so exciting, and I think if you join Rory's groups, you will have that sense of excitement and accelerated evolution, because the other members of the group are going to help you evolve quickly. So it's a very accelerated process. So it's a wonderful opportunity that Rory is giving us in setting up these networks to really make some quantum jumps in where we are as humanity. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your very big piece of the puzzle here, Rory, in creating a much better world for us. So God bless you. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
Well, gosh, Pam, thank you so much for giving me some time to talk about this. And I know it's a subject dear to your heart as well as mine. And so really thank you very much for that. Just be patient. The time will come. And don't feel rushed. We're being given every opportunity. We're given every support. We're actually pawns in the game of grand design. We don't need to worry too much. We just need to turn up. We need to take a little bit of action, just to take a few steps. Trust your intuition. Be guided, and there's one call out to one particular type of individual. This is the challenge for them, just for you. There are people who love being alone. They just love being isolated and all that. But the rather bizarre thing is that they're vital to the group. So take that step, join the group. It's not like you've got to be with the group all the time. You can do it remotely. But I find that the loners in the successful group love it in the end. They still get their space, but the group needs that loner. So that's like the one we know is important to all groups, and that shows the beautiful inclusivity that's required and necessary. But it does take everyone to take a step forward and to not be judgmental, and to just know that you're not going to need to be sitting around a dinner party and all having fun. This is a different type of fun. This is a sort of spiritual community that we're being guided towards. Yeah.
And also what I love about this, Rory, is that we know we're moving from a state of 3D pushing. You write the business plan, you see the bank manager, you get like that kind of logic and linearity and push and effort and struggle. We are moving away from that to greater yin energy, greater receptivity. So once you've made the step into the group, you then just surrender to the divine intelligence that's coming into you. Yeah,
I was only talking about this to a German gentleman in Bath yesterday, and he was talking about manifestation. I said, yeah, we know manifestation works. But just because you can doesn't mean to say you should. And even if you should, do you know when? So it's like, yeah, we have to surrender to that. Yes, we know we can do things, but is it right? Are we taking ourselves off the path? And in many ways, that's why it's called the Sacred Path modules. It's about finding not just how to get on the path, but how to stay on the path. So you're playing your part, not just within your own life, but collectively, because what we're doing collectively as a whole community is we're moving into this state of group consciousness. And I wish I had longer to talk about the wonderful awe of which we're finding that how the patterns of changing, the geometry is changing, and the oneness is approaching, and that expanded awareness that we're going to get, that's heightening our consciousness so that our perceptions are expanding, and we will see, feel, and hear things we haven't experienced before. And that's a whole new game on how we learn to deal with that. So it's going to be an incredible journey.
Yeah, it really is a whitewater rafting journey, as you say. So, a little while down the road, Rory, when you're further into this work, we may have another session and share again in terms of what's being discovered. But, bless you for your pioneering spirit, and bless you for your big heart, and bless you for creating something which is so perfect for the cosmology of our time. So it's always so inspiring to speak with you. So thank you. And everybody, check out the links below and get on board. It's a very exciting journey.
Thank you, Pam. But it really all comes from everyone else. Thank you.
I understand.
Yes.
Bye for now, everyone.
Bye.